So the 1940s became this huge growth period for Las Vegas on its own. Um, Coinciding with that, because this growth was happening, people around the country are going, maybe we need to invest some money in Las Vegas. So the first major investment that we're talking about really was the construction of the El Rancho Vegas Hotel. And
Okay.
that happened in 1941. And it was a much closer to what the kind of hotels you see today. Much smaller, but it had a lot of the hallmarks of what you expect today. It was on what is now the Las Vegas Strip, and it was very kind of low slung. And unlike Fremont Street, where every building was like right next to each other, kind of very urban style, uh,
Mm-hmm.
Rancho Vegas had a spread, so you could sign up to ride horses. There was a nice swimming pool. There was, all of these different amenities for you, trees and, open area where you could spend time, and then a casino, of course,
Yeah.
restaurant, and so forth. So the Rancho Vegas opens in 1941, and then in 1942, the Last Frontier opens. And the Last Frontier is even a little bigger than the El Rancho Vegas, has a few more amenities, and now you've got the makings of a new kind of resort destination here. Not just these little storefronts on Fremont Street. Now you've got these Palm Springs style resorts, where you can kind of spread your legs a little bit and relax and and do different activities, not just gambling and eating. And
Mm-hmm.
uh, so this was the emergence of what later became known as the Las Vegas Strip.
Okay. Interesting. So they just went to the area where the strip was just because they wanted more space to build like sort of their all-inclusive type of resort thing.
It was outside the city limits, which was
Oh.
desirable because the taxes were lower and the
Uh-huh.
regulations were more lax. But it also was on the highway, what they at the time was known as the Los Angeles Highway. And
Mm-hmm.
the Los Angeles Highway is now the Las Vegas Strip. But at the time, that was so you would, before you would even get to Fremont Street, you would see these resorts. And so they were that much closer, just a couple miles, but they were that much closer to LA. And
Right.
that was desirable.
Huh. Very cool.
Yeah.
Um, so it's kind of interesting how it's almost like the federal government with their different projects, building Hoover Dam and then having this Navy base or Air Force, what was it?
Essentially an Air Force base. Yeah.
Air Force base there, how they sort of created Vegas because they had these huge things drawing a lot of people there. And of course, these people wanted a place to go and hang out and relax and everything. So when that base came in, was there sort of a development more up to the suburbs of Vegas with more type of housing and typical neighborhoods?
Yeah, so exactly. You're right on track, by the way, by noting that the federal government has played a huge role in the rise of Las Vegas, and there's a couple more of those that we can talk about as we move forward.
Oh.
But Hoover Dam construction, and then the Army Air Base and the magnesium plant, that's all federal investment essentially in Las Vegas.
Mm-hmm.
So you could argue that the federal government kind of invented Las Vegas. Um, but there's even more afterward. As for development here, yes, the airbase was northeast of Las Vegas, and it was a little ways out, as you might expect. So the housing kind of moved in that direction first, and so you saw somewhat more typical suburban neighborhood development moving east.
Mm-hmm.
So Vegas moved east first, and then it moved west, and then it moves east and then north and then west and then south. That's just more inside, but um, yeah, so you start seeing regular, you see more homes, you see more sort of cracker box kind of homes, if you will, quickly
Mm-hmm.
built, so many of which still stand today. Many a hipster in Las Vegas wants one of those, and it's kind of where they want to live, and it's 1940s era homes, uh,
Uh,
but they're cool.
yeah.
Yeah, close to
Yeah.
downtown, close to the action.
Right. Okay. Interesting. So now that totally does make sense because I was always curious also about how the shift kind of from Fremont Street and kind of the original to Las Vegas Boulevard and where it is now. So that does make sense.
Now,
And then
I should note that Fremont Street continued to thrive at this
uh-huh.
point. It does run into some challenges later when the strip just becomes so big, it overwhelms Fremont Street. But really in the 40s and 50s and even the 60s, Fremont Street was still holding its own. It was still doing fine as a gambling area. But the strip was starting to emerge.
I see. Okay. And was Fremont Street essentially the same thing, or did they try to, I mean, during the 40s, 50s, and 60s, were they essentially the same, or did they try to match?
They no, they improved. They made enhancements. They built up instead of out. So you saw the every time they did an improvement, they built another tower, but they didn't have the space for to spread out. So you don't have some of those amenities that you would see on the strip, golf
Right.
courses and all these other things.
Yeah. So was that a typical? Do you know if that had been going on in other places like Palm Springs or other things where there were these huge resort type of things with all this, or was that kind of a new thing for Vegas?
No, I think we copied basically
Yeah.
other places. I think Palm Springs is a great example, not the only example, but I mean certainly uh, the idea of a resort destination that has some spread to it, where there's a golf course, there's tennis courts, there's big old swimming pool. There's you can ride horses, all these different things. So we had some racetracks here at one time. We
Hmm.
had a dog track, we had a horse track, cars. We were always looking for that amenity that we can add, and that started very early on the strip. They were emulating what they were seeing elsewhere.
Right, I see. Just making it a complete kind of travel destination with
With
everything you could
gambling, that
possibly.
was the difference. We added the gambling.
Right, I see. So that was the unique selling proposition for Vegas, huh?
I think so, and also entertainment. Although other places, entertainers performed in many places. This little old town of Las Vegas, still kind of a small place in the 40s, was attracting the biggest acts in the country. All the great performers of that era were Las Vegas was a stop on their tour. So they
Huh.
were stopping at the El Rancho Vegas or the Last Frontier or the Flamingo, which we'll probably get to, and some of these other resorts, to the point where in the 1950s, Las Vegas was making the claim that it was the entertainment capital of the world. People would argue with that, but we were doing pretty well in that area by then.
Right. So was it just were all these performers and entertainers stopping off just because they were able to sell a lot of tickets there, or was it because they themselves also like to stop in Vegas?
Oh, I think that they made good money.
Yeah.
Las Vegas would pay. They probably had to pay a little more to
Hmm.
bring people out to the desert, but they paid well, and the fans were very appreciative.
Wow, cool. So
Yeah,
even back then, people would still, even it was still kind of in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the desert, and people would still make the drive out.
yeah, yeah. It wasn't really until the 50s or really the early 60s that you saw a lot of air travel here.
Right.
Till jet age, the 60s when people started coming here en masse by plane.
I see. Okay, so we're in the 40s, and these newer, hotels and resorts are being built along, what would be Las Vegas Boulevard. Did that just continue to grow and more investors and builders came in and just kind of copied that model?
Yeah, so keep in mind, the El Rancho Vegas and the Last Frontier were built during World War II.
Ooh.
Now, the World War II, much like the Depression, there was a lot of demands on the country. I mean, you had
Mm-hmm.
all your men going overseas to fight, but you also were building all these weapons, and you were taking all these manufacturing plants and transforming them into military plants.
Mm-hmm.
And women are going out to work, Rosie the Riveter, and all that. Um, and there were rules like you can't use these materials to build a hotel. These need to go to the war.